Okay guys, let us discuss the HOC 1 joint evaluation pre-mock exam, biology paper 1. On to our first question. State 2 guidelines that should be followed when typing scientific names. Okay, so we are talking about the rules of binomial nomenclature. Rule number 1, the generic name, which is the genus name, should start with a capital letter, while the specific name should be written in small letters. Now, since we are talking about typing the names, therefore they should be in italics. Question number 2. An individual is of blood group A positive. Part A. Name the antigens in the individual's blood. Now, since the individual is of blood group A, that means that they will have antigen A. And because they are positive, this implies that they have the rhesus factor. So that means that they also have antigen type D, which is just another name for the rhesus factor. Part B. Can the individual receive blood from a blood group B donor? Give a reason to support your answer. No. Blood transfusion between these two individuals cannot happen. Reason being that the donor is of blood group B. That means that they will have antigen B, okay, the one in capital letters. The recipient is of blood group A. So that means that they will have antibody B, small b. So we're going to have antigen B, antibody B. So as you can see, they are corresponding, right? When this happens, agglutination follows. You're going to have clumping of red blood cells, which will interfere with blood flow. So transfusion between these two individuals should not be allowed to happen. Okay, moving on to question number 3. Now in this question, we are being told that how is a human mouth adapted to Roman 1, chewing, Roman 2, carbohydrate digestion. Okay, let's start with chewing. So we have teeth of different types for breaking down food into small particles. Now, Roman 2, how is our mouth adapted for digestion of carbohydrates? We have salivary glands that secrete saliva. Saliva contains an enzyme by the name of salivary amylase. This digests starch to maltose. Question number 4. Explain why significantly increasing the blood pH slows down the rate of selective reabsorption of materials in the kidney tubules. Okay, so if you look at this question, by the way, we have interlinking of several concepts. We are talking about reabsorption of substances in the kidney tubules, so that means within the nephron. We are also talking about how the pH would affect this process. Now, when it comes to selective reabsorption, this is a process that occurs within the nephron, okay? Specifically, it occurs within the proximal convoluted tubule. Now, selective reabsorption is whereby useful substances such as glucose and amino acids are reabsorbed back into the body, into the bloodstream. So we are talking about just selection of the useful substances and then having them being reabsorbed. And that is the reason why it's called selective reabsorption. Now, this process occurs by active transport. And as we are aware, active transport requires energy, right? Okay. And this energy is produced through the process of respiration. So selective reabsorption requires energy. Energy is produced during the process of respiration. Now, respiration as a process is controlled by enzymes. And enzymes are very, very sensitive to any changes that occur in the pH. So do you see where this question is heading to? So selective reabsorption of materials in the kidney tubules needs energy, which is produced through the process of respiration that is controlled by enzymes. Okay, it's controlled by respiratory enzymes. Enzymes are affected by any changes in pH. So what will happen is that if you significantly. By this, significantly means you change the blood pH a lot and you're increasing it, so you're making it to become alkaline. It will affect the functioning of these enzymes. So that means less energy is going to be produced, or they could be denatured completely. If the enzymes are denatured by the high pH, you're not going to have respiration taking place. Energy will not be produced, and therefore selective reabsorption is going to come to a stop. Okay, moving on to our next question. State two differences between light-dependent and light-independent stages of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis occurs in two stages. The first stage is light-dependent, okay, because this can only occur in the presence of light. The second stage is light-independent stage. This means that it's not dependent on light. It can occur anytime, whether light is present or not. So both of these two stages occur within the chloroplast, but at different areas. The light-dependent stage occurs in the grana. The light-independent stage, which we also call the dark stage, occurs in the stroma. Now, when you talk about the products of the light-dependent stage, it produces hydrogen atoms and oxygen gas, okay? This is through the process that we call photolysis, where water molecules are split using light energy to produce hydrogen atoms and oxygen gas. Light-independent stage, on the other hand, produces glucose, okay? So the end product is usually a food substance such as glucose, usually simple carbohydrates. Okay, moving on to question number 6. Part A, a student was viewing a slide preparation of a chick cell under a high power of the microscope. The features of the cell were blood. Name the part of the microscope that the student needs to use to obtain a sharper outline of the features, okay? So essentially what the student needs to do is simply focus, so as to bring the image into a sharp outline. And for this, they are going to use a fine adjustment knob. Part C, name the organelles that are responsible for the formation of spindle fibers. These organelles are centrioles, and this occurs during cell division, during meiosis and mitosis. Okay, question number 7, part A. Distinguish between guttation and transpiration. Now, both of these processes involve the loss of water from a plant. The difference is where this water is lost from and in what form, okay? Now, when we talk about transpiration, this is the process by which plants lose water in form of vapor, mostly through stomata in the leaves. Guttation, on the other hand, is also the loss of water, but in form of droplets, okay? And this occurs through openings that are found on the edges of the leaf. These openings are known as hydatodes. Part B. Describe how each of the following factors increases the rate of transpiration. Okay, part 1, temperature. So what temperature does is that it increases the internal temperature of the leaf, which in turn increases the latent heat of evaporation. So you have more water being lost by the plant. Now, when it comes to humidity, what happens is that if you have a dry atmosphere, remember the question is asking us how these factors would increase the rate of transpiration. So we're talking about low humidity, where the surrounding is dry, where the atmosphere is dry because it has very little moisture in it. So you're going to have a saturation deficit, where you have more water within the leaf tissues and less of it in the surrounding atmosphere. So this causes more water to move from the air spaces within the leaf to the surrounding. So this increases the rate of evaporation. Okay, moving on to our next question. Describe 4 assumptions of capture-recapture method used in estimation of population of organisms. Okay, so assumption number 1, there's not going to be any migration of the organisms during the period of study. Number 2, the mark that you are going to place on the organisms will not affect their behavior. Number 3, the marked animals will be free to mix with the others in the ponds, and they will also have enough time to mix with the others. So we actually have 2 different things here. Number 1 is that they would be able to mix with the others, and they will be afforded enough time to do so. Okay. Part B. State 2 reasons why primary productivity in a pond decreases with depth. So primary productivity is whereby you're going to have organisms such as plants, or in this case, because it's a pond, algae, manufacturing their own food through the process of photosynthesis. So the question wants to know why. The deeper you go into the pond, the less productivity there is, the less, food that is manufactured by such organisms. Now, number 1 is that you're going to have decrease in light intensity as the depth increases. The deeper you go into the pond, the less light that is able to penetrate. So, of course, this is going to affect photosynthesis. Number 2 is that there's going to be a decrease in temperature as the depth increases. The deeper you go, the cooler the temperatures become. Now, we know that photosynthesis is a process that is controlled by enzymes, which are sensitive to temperature changes. So if you have temperatures being lowered, what will happen is that the enzymes are going to be inactive, which would lower the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, moving on to the next question. Study the illustration below. Okay, so just pause the video if you would like more time to go through the diagram. Now, once you have done so, we are being told to name the substance responsible for the change illustrated. Now, as you can see, this is based on osmosis, which involves the movement of water molecules across a semi-permeable membrane. So the substance responsible for the change is water molecules. Part B, account for the solution. Part B, account for the change observed in the illustration. Now, as we can see, solution B is going to be hypertonic to solution A. So, water molecules will always move from the solution that is hypotonic to the one that is hypertonic. Hypo to hyper. So, you're going to have movement of water molecules from A to B by osmosis across the semi-permeable membrane. This, of course, will lead to an increase in the volume of B. Question number 10. How does nutrition as a characteristic of living organisms differ in plants and animals? Okay. Now, nutrition is a characteristic that is present in all organisms, but the way plants obtain nutrients is totally different from the way we as animals do so. So plants manufacture their own food used from carbon dioxide and water in the presence of light. Okay, so this is what photosynthesis is all about. Animals, on the other hand, eat ready-made food either from plants or from other animals. Question number 11. A person met a leopard as he walked along a forest path. His adrenal glands secreted adrenaline to prepare him to run away. What was the effect of adrenaline on his circulatory system? Now, adrenaline is a hormone that is secreted by the adrenal glands. These are a pair of glands that are located just above our kidney. So adrenaline is usually produced when in cases whereby our body has to either fight, protect us, or run away from a source of threat or danger. So in this case, adrenal glands secreted adrenaline to prepare him to run away when he met a leopard. So we're being asked to specify the effect of this hormone on the circulatory system only. So number 1, the heartbeat would increase, the blood vessels are going to dilate, okay, so as to transport more blood. Now this allows them to supply, the tissues with more oxygen and nutrients for production of energy, and also to remove carbon dioxide that is going to be produced as a waste product of respiration. Our next question. Small birds like the European robin puff up, swell up their feathers during winter. Explain the significance of this behavioral response. Okay, now when it comes to such birds, the reason why they puff up their feathers, swell up, okay, is to reduce heat loss. It's just that. Remember, we're talking about winter, okay? So what the feathers do is that they trap more air, and air is a poor conductor of heat. So what it does is that it insulates the body against heat loss. Okay, on to our next question. Part A, name the product of glycolysis. So glycolysis is the first stage of aerobic respiration. We have glycolysis followed by the Krebs cycle. Now, the product of glycolysis is pyruvic acid. This is also known as pyruvate. Part B, what is the role of cristae in a mitochondrion? Now, mitochondria are double membrane organelles. They have an outer membrane and an inner membrane. The inner membrane is highly folded to form these projections called cristae. Now, cristae increase the surface area for the attachment of respiratory enzymes. 15. Name one part of the kidney nephron where reabsorption of water takes place. Okay, so within the kidney nephron, reabsorption of water occurs in different places. We are going to have it taking place in small amounts in the proximal convoluted tubule, in the loop of Henle, in the distal convoluted tubule, and even in the collecting tubule. Okay, question number 16. Treatment of malaria is still a challenge in the world, despite the invention of many anti-malarial drugs. Explain. So the question wants to know, why do we have so many drugs, fighting malaria, fighting Plasmodium, which is the causative agent of malaria, yet so many people, millions of people die every year just from this disease? Now the reason comes back to how the parasites evolve. So they are capable of undergoing mutations, okay, random changes within their genetic makeup. And when they mutate, they acquire the gene for resistance to the drugs, okay, the drugs that are being used. So they become resistant to them. So what will happen is that these plasmodia that are resistant are going to survive to maturity, reproduce, pass on this gene to their offspring, okay? So you're going to end up having a new population of resistant parasites being developed. Now, those parasites that were not capable of forming this gene are going to be eliminated from the population. So that means that over time, you need to have more drugs being created that will fight, the parasites temporarily before they mutate and develop a gene against it. Okay, now let's move on to our next question. Now, in this question, we're being told that the graph below represents a growth pattern in a group of organisms. Name the type of growth curve, okay? So this is the intermittent growth curve. where growth happens in stages, okay, and then pauses in between. Name the phylum that shows this type of pattern. This is present in arthropods, so the phylum is Arthropoda. State one disadvantage of this type of pattern, okay? It can only occur in intervals, okay? Reason being that because of the hard exoskeleton that is present on the outer part of the animals, it limits growth, it prevents them from growing. So what happens is that they need to shed it during certain periods of their life cycle so that they can grow and then just regrow the exoskeleton. Question number 18. After 4 months of pregnancy, the ovaries of a woman can be removed without terminating pregnancy. Explain these observations. Now, when we talk about the ovaries have two main functions. Number one is production of female gametes. These are the egg cells. Number two is production of hormones, specifically progesterone and estrogen. Now, I want to focus on progesterone. Progesterone is a hormone that is crucial for pregnancy. It maintains pregnancy. So it needs to be secreted in high amounts throughout pregnancy. Now, initially, during the first 4 months, it's actually the ovaries that are responsible for secretion of progesterone. But after the 4th month, this role is taken over by the placenta. So at this point, if the ovaries are removed, it won't affect production of progesterone because it will be produced by the placenta at this point. Okay. Let us proceed to our next question, number 19. The diagram below represents a flower. On the diagram, name two structures where meiosis occurs. Now, meiosis occurs in number 1, it occurs in the ovary, and it also occurs in the anthers. The anthers have the male gametes, the ovaries have the female gametes. Roman number 2. How is the flower adapted to prevent self-pollination? Now, a lot of plants prefer cross-pollination rather than self-pollination because it introduces variations and also makes the plants, the offsprings, to have hybrid vigor, become stronger, better adapted to the surrounding compared to their parents. Now, in order to prevent self-pollination, we can clearly see that we have heterostyly. As you can see from this diagram, the anthers are below the stigma, okay? So what happens is that you cannot have the pollen grains of this flower being shed onto the stigma because the stigma is so high above the anthers. Now, another thing is that you can see the petals. Look at the petals. They're so large and conspicuous and brightly colored. So they are attracting insects, okay? They want to pull insects to their flowers so that when the insects come, hopefully, they will also come with pollen grain from another flower. Okay, moving on to our next question. Now, in this question, we're being told that the genetic makeup of a man was found to be XXY. Name the syndrome the individual could be suffering from. Now, when a person has 3 copies of the sex chromosome, in this case, we have 2 copies of the X chromosome and 1 copy of the Y chromosome. So a total of 3. So when a person has an extra sex chromosome, then they are said to have Klinefelter's syndrome. Part B. Explain how the syndrome occurs. Now, this condition is based on non-disjunction and it occurs in anaphase 1 of meiosis, okay? Now, in anaphase 1, we are supposed to have homologous chromosomes separating into 2 different gametes, okay? But what happens is that in this case, the homologous chromosomes fail to separate, okay? They go as a pair into 1 gamete. So let's imagine that that gamete will lead to the formation of a sperm cell. If that sperm cell will then end up, fertilizing an egg cell that already has an X chromosome, you are going to end up having an individual with the genetic makeup of XX. X, Y. Okay, moving on to our last question. Explain how the human nasal cavity is adapted to gaseous exchange. Okay, number one, it's lined with hair. This hair acts as a filter. It traps any dust particles, foreign materials, okay? Number two is that it has goblet cells which secrete mucus for moistening of the air, okay? We want the air to be moist so that it doesn't irritate any of our respiratory surfaces, and also so that it becomes easier to diffuse.